Hey, welcome, Cattle Drive Live. Corey and I are back with what we promised the other night when we visited with the American Menagerie Association. This is, I guess, episode one of what we have dubbed Humble Beginnings, Corey.
You bet. We're going to go through and get I guess you'd say, a behind the scene look at some of the industry legends and kind of hear their stories and the humble beginnings that they all came from.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know that this is going to necessarily be a timeline of each and every person that's going to be on here, but I tell you, for me, it's about getting out some stories that we feel like don't need to be left behind. It's finding out how these guys have stepped on stones, and there's going to be times I hope we get to hear some setbacks. I hope we get to hear about how they use those setbacks to get to the next big rock. And tell you what, we talk about big rocks, we talk about big names. We are starting, in my mind, with one of the biggest in the business. Uh, Brandon Horn is going to be with us today to give us his humble beginnings and how he got to the point of where he's at today with his business and his family and all the success that he's had. I know along the way there's been bumps and bruises, and hopefully we'll be able to learn a little bit of how he dealt with some of those to get where he's at today. So anyway, with that being said, Corey, I know there's going to be a lot of people traveling towards those junior nationals over the next few weeks, and our goal with these is to give them something to listen to on the weekend as they're driving, or maybe it's just in the barn preparing for the next week. But our goal over the next several weeks is going to give you something to listen to in the tractor or the feed truck or with your family on the way to a national junior show. So
You bet.
anyway, well, hey,
Absolutely.
welcome him in and let's get fired up.
You bet. We're going to bring in Brandon.
Hey, hey.
Oh, how are you, man?
Oh, great.
Great.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Yes,
Thanks for
sir.
the opportunity.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's good. Brandon Horn, owner and operator of Horn Livestock in Anson, Texas. Brandon, just real quick, tell us a little bit of very quick, like Horn Livestock, where you're located, and the nuts and bolts, real quick, of what makes you tick.
Brandon Horn, my wife Breck, son Jagger, and daughter Avon. Um, we're in Anson, Texas. We try to hit all aspects of the business in the club calf industry. We raise slick sheared steers, basically is main our motto. But we raise what we like to think our bulls have spoke for themselves in the past, and um, we have Charlet Cross genetics that we are very humbled to have and very proud of. They've made our sole living for the past 17 years, and it's been quite humbling, honestly, to watch it all unfold for somebody as illiterate as I am to do what I do daily. So,
Yeah, awesome. Good deal. I can tell you, we're going to work through this tonight, and I know that along the way here, people are going to get tired of listening to you just say how humbling it is for you. But I know you on a personal level, as a lot of other people do too. You are very thankful for what the Lord's blessed you with. You're very thankful. You're very proud of your family. And I know if you get tired of hearing somebody say that, go ahead and turn it off right now because it's as real right now. It'll be as real when we're done. That's just how he is, and that's what I love about my friend here. But let's get started in this deal, and let's take us to Southwest Oklahoma, Lukiba Sickles area. Your dad was probably one of the biggest figures in Southwest Oklahoma, and probably as integral in starting club calf trading as it's known today. Tell us a little bit about Larry Horn.
oh, um, obviously, I was born into, um, but I didn't know it as a name. I know when I was old enough to know what was going on, my dad we would have cattle around, show cattle, obviously, and he was an ag teacher. never ever, when I was old enough to remember, that he was finding out later that he was kind of a hog man. But we had show cattle around from when I can remember. We were never owners of a piece of property, obviously. Honestly, us saying we rented, and he'd been the ag teacher there at Low-Kiva Sickles 7-8 years maybe before he'd passed away. And before that, we would have been in Mountain View, Oklahoma, and then before that, maybe in Canute, Oklahoma. There's the figures around there. Mickey Peck, he was his ag teacher, I believe. I don't think he was Dean Kepart's, but I'm real sure he was Mickey Peck's. And then maybe he went to Mountain View, and then Low-Kiva Sickles, a consolidated school there from the 50s or 60s, and then he was the ag teacher there. I was born in 74. He passed away in 1985. So I was 11, going on 12, and I can remember going with him to buy cattle in what we called the Midwest, or up north is how we would say it. And some names that are still figures of the business today, maybe not on person to person, but passed down from generation, from what we used to do. And I say we, my dad obviously was ag teacher there, and it was accustomed at the time, right. The school next door was Eakley, Oklahoma, and a gentleman by the name of Alan Kopus, which is Mark Kopus's dad. He was the ag teacher there. And both of those guys were two of the first guys, probably with a guy named Peyton Scott as well, to start traveling north and buying cattle that were ranch raised. And my dad and Alan as well, with some of the people that they knew, a name pops up to my head as Billy Rash. They would go, and my dad would, he knew the need for the cattle to be not necessarily in Oklahoma, but to send south to Texas. And we would travel and buy a group of calves and bring them home. And there wasn't such thing back then as barn help and hired hands. That was, I have an older brother named Colby. He's employed by National Beef in Kansas City. And anyway, he was just a year older than I was. And anyway, he would, it was our job I've got a younger brother that's Casey Horn, and he wasn't probably old enough to do many chores yet, but we all were involved. And when my dad would leave, my mom would want him to take one of us with him. And that usually was my gig, because Kobe was old enough to do more chores. And I was the one to try to keep my dad awake on the trips. We would leave Thursday after school, miss school Friday, and be rolling back in time to take a bath or a shower, and roll. Back then, everybody likes to call it a shower. Back then, there wasn't many showers. There was mainly a bath. We'd take a bath and go to school in time, 8 o'clock on a Monday morning, with basically pickup time as the motel. So Thursday to Monday, and unless we shacked up with one of the ranchers in South Dakota or Nebraska, that's basically what would happen, as we made us a little circle in the tour and brought a 28-foot shop built at Low-Kiva Sickles ag shop, trailer full of cattle home to prepare to sell. So in a podcast earlier recorded by you guys, I talked about Bobby Maddox. One of the coolest things I'd ever seen was he come to our house to clip some calves. There wasn't a barn. We clipped them out in the open in a club calf chute. Those old blue and yellow chutes were built in Hobart, Oklahoma. I don't even remember the name of them, but anyway, a little 6-foot club calf chute. And Maddox come to clip a couple of calves for us, and then he finished, and we were going back to the ag building, and I saw him shift not a 5-speed, a 4-speed, 454, 81 or 2 model pickup without a clutch, and I thought that was the coolest thing I'd ever seen in my life.
Hey,
So there you go.
Speaking of driving, I've heard a couple stories now. One about you and your dad when you were up there doing club calf shopping, and Kim getting a little tired. And how old were you?
That would have been 7 or 8, maybe 6. I'm not just 100% sure. That part's blurry, the timeline, but I can remember the shirt he had on, and I don't remember the shirt I had on, but I can remember watching him over there. And my job, my mom told me, was keep him awake. Don't let him fall asleep. And so I can remember him going to shaking his legs, and all these guys that knew him, Mark Kopus and Ron Bailey and Deron Helderman, Bobby Maddox, those type of guys that were around him back then, Tonto Cassie, Mitch Milliron, those type of guys, they would know because they spent time with him. When he'd get tired, he would go to shaking his legs, and he'd shake them 6-8 inches apart, and just shaking where you'd almost be the accelerator back then is different than it is now. Like a 55 probably seems like 95 today. And anyway, he'd go to shaking his legs. I said, hey, we're going to have to pull over. We're going to do something. And he'd go, hey, I can remember this like it was yesterday. He said, why don't you crawl up here and you drive a while? He said, I can hold the gas and you drive. I'm going to take a little nap. And he said, if we get in a little jam, you wake me up and I'll hit the brake. The curves and the straightaways, and I can handle the rest. I said, yes, sir. And so that was it. Now, I can remember that like it was honestly yesterday, and I know it's been 40 years, but I can honestly remember that like it was yesterday, and thinking today how that would work. Wow. Yeah. I get nervous when my daughter leaves to go to the store. So, yes. Me driving my dad while he's asleep and on his knee, and 6 or 7 years old at the most, and me handling the wheel with a load of cattle in the back.
Oh my God!
That's some memories that I'll cherish and never forget. Just the good old days.
Yeah,
I can remember this, that one of the most memorable trips. There was a gentleman, I'm going to throw some names out there that there'll be some old timers remembering, but a lot of these guys don't know this guy, but there was a guy named Dale Riesel. And that's a name that I'll always remember because he had a set of Hereford Cross cows, and we bought my first steer. Well, actually, it wasn't my first. Yeah, it was my first steer. It was my first steer. It would have been champion Hereford in 1984 at Oklahoma City. And I don't have a picture of that steer. There's one somewhere we can dig up, but I don't have one around here. But that was back in the day. And I don't know if I'm sure they don't do it anymore because it's just not part of the game. But back then, you would be a breed champion in Oklahoma City, horned Hereford or polled Hereford, and you'd get a plastic, what we call a water jug now, a 5-gallon water jug with the neck on the top that you buy water in, and they would stuff 1,200. I don't know why it's 1,250, but it was 1,250 for champion and 1,000 for reserve, and just stuff $1,250 $1 bills in that jug. And if you had to breed champion Hereford at Oklahoma City, you would win that. And I can remember one of our trips to South Dakota. We were looking through these calves, and my dad said, hey, there's your calf right there. And I said, do what? He said, there's your calf right there. That's the winner. And I can remember that as well, like it was yesterday. And our trip, we stayed the night with this Dale Riesel. He had a son that was close to my age, which I'm telling my age, but I'm 49 now. And that son went on to wrestle, I think, at South Dakota State. I lost track of those guys, but I do know this for a fact that Steve Gilbert from Canute, Oklahoma, he bought the cow herd before the guy sold out, never had club calves again, but he bought that cow herd. And that cow herd maybe had some line one Semitals or line one Herefords. I don't know what they were.
Yeah.
Y'all would know more about that than me in the purebred world. But anyway, that set of Hereford cows was, I can remember going there, and I can remember freeze branding cattle for the first time, me seeing that, and at the Caffey's place as well, watching them freeze brand cattle. Les Caffey is the guy I remember. But it's been, like I said, 40 plus years ago. So there's a lot of memories I have, and a few names I remember, and a few places I remember. But I do know one of the first trips we went on was that, and that steer we'd have bought him in the early 80s, and he was the champion Hereford steer in 1984. And my dad would have been alive at that point and there for that show. I remember going back to the stall when it was over, and he took his pocket knife and cut the plastic jug, and we got the $100 bills out. I mean, the $1 bills out of there. I thought they were hundreds. I never seen that much money in my life.
Wow.
$150. I said, what are we going to do with all this money?
Right.
And there's a place for it, I promise you.
Right. Yeah. Lots of memories just for just a few short years that you were with your dad. There just seemed like we could go on and on here of memories that just have seemed to come back about your young years with your dad. But it's unfortunate that in 1985 at what's now Oklahoma Youth Expo, used to be just Spring Livestock Show, during Heifer Week, it's unfortunate that the world lost your dad.
Yes, sir. It was that's a memory that sticks with me, and something that I won't ever forget. My brother actually had a steer. My dad had gone to South Dakota, and I do remember this guy's name, and so I won't forget. My dad bought a short horn herd for my grandfather, which was his dad, from a guy named Chuck Knoll. And he had, I think we called a herd, then there was 25 or 30 cows, and AI was just kind of coming into its own and becoming something that you did to breed your cattle, artificial insemination. And my dad bought this set of cows, and then we bred them, artificially inseminated them to a bull called Dividend. And that Dividend bull, I was probably raised, I'm thinking for sure in my mind, it might be wrong, but George Alden, maybe Alden Farms had that bull, and he raised, we raised that set of calves, and I got to keep a heifer out of that group, and my older brother Colby got to keep a steer, and his steer's name was Frosty, and my heifer's name was Sugar. And my heifer, honestly, had never been beaten. We'd showed her in 84 and then into 85. She was a coming 2-year-old. And we were there to show her when my father passed away, that March 16th, 1985. She was supposed to show the morning that he passed. He picked up the wake-up call and was obviously having a heart attack. Nobody knew that till later, but at 5 o'clock that morning, he picked up the wake-up call, answered the phone, set it down, and then my mother rolled over and said, "Larry, you better get up. You've overslept," and it was too late at that point. Right. So yes, we didn't show my heifer that day. My older brother Colby had Frosty on feed. That was later the next week. And I want to tell you, men, something, and it's emotional to me. Real emotional.
I can only imagine.
Several what we call big names in the business today stepped up. I can remember coming home from the show. Heck, it's rough right here, boys. I
Yes,
didn't
sir.
know I was signing up for this. Anyway, we was coming home from the show. We come home from the show, and I can remember there's a lot of people at my house. And I'll never forget Mark Copus pulled in with a pickup and a trailer. And Colby and I were at the barn. And he said, "You boys hop that steer on that trailer. I've got this from here. I'm going to go talk to your mother." And I guess the rest is history.
Right.
Him and Bobby Maddox come in from Texas. Ron Bailey helped him. He come in from Texas. I think Steve Bonham helped some. Mitch Milliron, I can remember them. Deron Hilderman. And then Tonto Cassie was one of his good friends. He was in the Kenning days back then. Anyway, all those guys stepped up, and Mark come and got the calf and clipped him, helped finish clipping him. And there was a guy named Daryl Clem that my dad had heard was about as good a clipper as there was, and that's a name before time, and he was supposed to have been maybe one of the best there was. And Daryl Clem, me and my dad had gone to pick him up, and he was clipping on the steer while we were at the heifer show. When all this had gone down, Daryl had finished clipping the calf and went home. And then Mark showed up, got the calf. They went to the show, and the steer would end up being the grand steer at Oklahoma City the following week.
Yeah, I think we need to clarify something here real quick. That Corey and I actually talked this story a couple of days ago. I shared with him that story. Mark had told, I think, Corey and I at Oklahoma City that story. But I think we need to clarify something for those listening right now to understand something. You just name dropped Steve Bonham, Mark Copus, Bobby Maddox. You listed three of quite possibly the biggest names in the business.
Yes,
the
sir.
problem with that name drop is this. You were 9. Those guys were 18, 19, 20-year-old kids. And I tell you that because when I first heard the story, I got chills listening to Mark tell me the story, because what I thought about right then, and I will only say this name because I was at the steer show, I thought about the fact that if I had died, that is quintessentially Baylor Bonham driving into my driveway, picking up my kids. We
Yes,
look
sir.
at Mark and Steve and Bobby Maddox as what they are today. They weren't those guys when this happened. So it wasn't like you had the fortunate of having the greatest of greats there.
Yes,
These
sir.
guys become great since that time. I think that just needs to be noted, that you had the elites, but they weren't quite elite then. So, but
Humble beginnings, brother.
absolutely.
And when Mark tells that story, I've never seen that much emotion. You know, that guy there ain't big on emotions, and that guy there, he had the same emotion telling that story as you just did when you told it.
Yeah, and you know, with that being said, I can name drop some more, and it's emotional, all of it to me, but that's what drives me daily, guys. Dan Hogue was the judge. The guy that still runs OYE basically today. I'm not saying he ran it then, but hey, and he's as stand-up a good a guy as they make. And I have zero relationship with him, but I'm just telling you, Jimmy Harrell's daughter was a senior when that Shorthorn was the grand steer of the show, and her name was Keela Harrell. Mm-hmm. Kirk Sturwalt helped them and was their what you call groomer. That's what he calls it. We call it a fitter. Sturwalt calls it a groomer still. So Kirk he helped them at that point. I'm thinking I'm right on that. I might be wrong. I might be off a year or two on that, but I'm thinking Kirk helped them. And I want y'all to know that there's something that happened that I'll never forget, that like this did not happen then. And Jimmy Harrell, and it's something that I will always honor him, and he has a high expectation, and I have a high expectation of him. I don't know the word I'm looking for, but anyway, I hold him on a pedestal. Hey, I remember he beat our shorthorn steer, my older brother's calf, beat his daughter's senior year steer. He had won the year before, and he was reserve grand that year, and I think he added on more than anybody to our steer that won the show. Man, it was many years ago. I don't remember a dollar meant a dollar back then. We needed every bit to survive. But I'm thinking in my mind, he added on $2,500, and that's something I'll never forget. We beat my older brother won the show, and that was something that I admired about that guy. That he was as happy for us as we were to win.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
Well, and it was emotional, and he said it was hands down the most unique calf he'd seen. Right. That steer, to my knowledge, never got beat. My heifer never got beat.
Gotcha.
So this is 19 heifer never bred. There's your probably reason that boys that I don't show and sell me show heifers. Don't take any of that the wrong way. She never had a calf.
Hey, and that steer was a dividend?
He was a dividend, correct.
Right off of that same, he was a registered purebred shorthorn.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. How about it?
Yeah.
And there wasn't such thing as heat seeker then, man.
Yeah.
You couldn't get a shorthorn without breeding one.
Right. I got you. So that's 1985. 1986. This picture here floats around the internet just a little bit of a young Brandon Horn standing in front of a backdrop, the National Western Livestock Show, with another shorthorn colored steer.
Yeah, there you go. I won't forget that memory with my dad as well. In March, man, I don't know. I don't remember when the time of year it was, honestly. But I can remember we were around Shawnee, maybe somewhere around there, and he was judging a county show. And my dad, a guy by the name of Bill Stanley that lived in Newcastle, of all places, home of the Steve Bonham. Anyway, before Steve Bonham was in Newcastle, this guy named Bill Stanley and my dad somehow were friends. And my dad had given him, he had a purebred Maine cow, a red and white, or a cherry red. I don't remember the exact color of the cow, but I know she was red. He told Bill, "Well, AI that cow to Mr. Legs," a guy by the name of Billy Joe Fisher in McLeod, Oklahoma, owned that bull. And he said, "I'd sure like a chance to buy the calf if you have a bull calf." I know we were judging that. I know all this because we were judging. He was judging that county show, and I rode with him. And he said, "Hey, we got to stop by Newcastle on the way home and look at a calf." I can remember this like it was yesterday. This calf walked around the backside of this creek feeder weighing 250, 300 pounds. And my dad said, "There's your calf right there." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "That's the winner." And there he was. That's him. Unfortunately, my dad passed away before he got to see me show the calf. Other than at the prospect level, we prospected him once or twice. He would have been 6 months younger than Frosty. But that calf was the grand in 86. I guess he might have been a year younger. I said 6 months, but he'd been a year younger. That calf was the grand at Denver in 86. I think that calf was about a May, honestly, on their age. Because I can remember us showing him in Texas, and there was some guys with some interest about buying him, and they were wondering if we would hold his teeth. They were asking Mark, because Mark Kopus helped me with the calf, asking if we would guarantee him to hold his teeth to Houston. And Mark told me, "Tell him we're going to guarantee him to our trailer, not their trailer."
Hey, is that the same calf in Mark's living room that has
Yes.
that picture of.
He won the belt buckle bonanza
yeah.
in 1985.
Yeah,
I
and it's
got you.
him and Copa. There's Copus
Yeah,
and
it wasn't. I got a
May.
neat story on that too. I had the super fitters of all super fitters, and you can tell there this is in the winter, and you can see how much leg hair's on that calf. So we really thought we were doing some good. But so showing him in July, you can imagine how much leg hair he had. That was right there is in January. But I'll never forget this. The three familiar names, and then the one Mike Wilhelm was the other one. But he was champion shorthorn at the belt buckle bonanza, and then in the grand drive, Mark told me to go take the purple oil. There wasn't no hokey pokey back then, no hocus pocus. So he said, take that purple oil. And if anybody knows what purple oil is, when you put it in one's hair, you did have to scrub them 4 or 5 times to get the oil out before you put glue back in them.
Greasy, yeah.
Yes. So he said, go wash him spot and let him lay down. We're going to refit him. I said, there's no way. He said, just do what I ask you. So, I did what he asked me, and I did. And then when it come time to fit him, I was concerned about how much time we were going to have and if it was going to work. And then looked up, and then I had Kirk Sturwalt, Bobby May, and Mark Copus and Mike Wilhelm all each had a leg, and they were fitting on my steer. And he ended up winning that show as well. He won the belt buckle bonanza in 1985. That's in July, 1st of July.
I'll be dang. 19.
Hey, we can't leave one thing out.
Okay.
My bride just informed me, and I did know this, but it's not that much of a memory to me because I don't remember. But my wife had the champion Brangus at the same show the same day, and we never met.
At the National Western.
No, at the belt buckle bonanza.
At the belt buckle.
Yes.
Oh.
How about that?
Right.
So
that's very interesting. It took you that long to find her?
It did. Hey, she told me that, and I didn't call her bluff, but I did go back and try to find some magazine articles to see if she wasn't kind of fibbing just a little, and I found it, and she did have the champion Brangus at the show.
I got you. Kick along here. Let's go 1990. You did the old 1-2 punch in the state of Oklahoma. 1990, you win Oklahoma City with a limousine steer from Ron Bailey.
Hey, plug for Stuman Limousine Ranch. Anyway, that year the purebred Stuman Limousines was champion at San Antonio, Houston, and Oklahoma City. Harlan Ritchie would have judged right there. He's not in that picture, but hey, y'all looky there. Bob Funk, he hadn't changed his look any since 1990.
Yeah.
That's Bob Funk in the middle, y'all.
That's right. Yeah.
Same hat, new woman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
that's Ron Bailey on clear.
That's
on the
RB
right,
on the right.
Yeah,
I want everybody to know that my dad was Ron Bailey's ag teacher, and Ron Bailey was actually where I live now. Ron Bailey was living in Abilene, Texas, and I think he missed home. And when my dad passed away, he moved back home, and he and Steve is who helped me continue to show calves. My older brother wanted to be a baseball player, and I wanted to show calves, and Ron and Steve made it happen for me. So
also the
I'll put
background is
those
Richie
guys
Oakes.
anytime. Those guys have a good heart, and they're good men, and I'll go to bat for them at any time.
Absolutely. Standing in that picture also next to Funk, that's, I think, Richie Oakes.
No, that's not Richie. I can tell you who that is, but I lost track of his name.
Oh, it looked like Richie Oakes from here.
No, it's not Richie. It's a gentleman that ended up being, I think he was a state representative around Lawton there. We'd
Okay,
have to
maybe
get Hoopy
not.
online, tell us who that
Yeah,
is.
probably. Yeah, I'm not sure who that. Boy, it looks like Richie Oakes, and then Dave Stoltz.
Yep,
Oh, that is?
that's Dave Stoltz.
How about
He
that?
looks like he's 14.
Golly. Boy,
Yeah,
he does. Yeah.
I'll be dang. See, and then
Uh,
that same year, that very same year, you win Tulsa.
Yes, sir.
Black Baldy.
Yes, sir. That
Yeah.
was, I don't have a picture of that thing here. I don't know if y'all have one, but I don't have one. But that was kind of a really neat story and a really neat time in my life. We grew up in baseball country, played a lot of baseball. I had an opportunity to play for a state title the same time I have the very best that's changed nowadays, the very best baseball coach that there was. And he was a great man, and he was an ag man. Him and Ron Bailey actually played against each other from Eakley to Low-Kiba Sickles. And anyway, Stan Bixler would have raised the calf, the Black Baldy, got him from Steve and Ron. He was a Kennebec. And Kennebec would have been a Maine bull from
yeah.
the Youngs.
Yeah.
So the steer, those guys, and they still do, that they, every time Steve Bonham bids on a calf, everybody thinks he's going to win. So with that being said, those guys had the eye to go and pick the ones and put on feed. And very humble beginning. We're talking about this, but man, blessed to have those guys in my life. No
Right.
two ways about it. There's no two ways about it. Well, that steer wasn't a popular one. They thought he would feed good. He had a neat color. Guy by the name of Gerald Callahan judged Tulsa, and the steer won the show. But before time to go to the show, in the fall in Oklahoma, where we're from, there in the small schools, you play for a state title in baseball in Class B and Class A in the fall instead of football if you didn't have football. Well, I wasn't a very good pitcher, but I could throw strikes. And we had a pretty good defense, so we had two studs that could throw the ball in the middle to upper 80s and could get people out. And my coach, I told him there's a chance that I might not be there on Thursday at the state baseball tournament. He said, "What do you mean there's a chance? You either are or you're not." And I said, "Man, our steer looks good." And Ron said if he looks real good after we finish clipping him, that I will be showing at Tulsa. And, that's our plan. We wasn't planning on being in the state tournament, and we wasn't planning on winning Tulsa. But these things have come up, and this is what we presented with. And pretty neat story, and I'll make this quick, but the baseball, my coach still makes a living in ag today, and he said, hey, take your glove, play catch in the parking lot with somebody you know. Keep your arm loose. He said, you're supposed to pitch the first game. I think we can out-hit them and get them out. We were going to have to do that if you pitched anyway. But he said, show your calf, sell your calf, be back for the game Friday. I said, yes, sir. End up on a Thursday, the steer was the grand steer at the Tulsa State Fair. We won the baseball game. My coach, in an interview for the newspaper, said I was known as Little Horn because my brother was a year older than me and a stud in baseball. He says Little Horn was supposed to pitch today, but we got by without him. I understand he just had the grand steer at the Tulsa State Fair. It looks to me like he made the right decision. So how many baseball coaches do y'all know would say something like that in a newspaper article? Anyway, long story short, I had some friends by Chad Chaplin and the other guys. They watched my calf. I sold him on Friday morning, got back for the game to play Friday night. Played against the minor twins from Hammond that played in the MLB, both of them, and the NBA on Ryan. And then in the state championship game, we played Asher. They were the winningest program in the state of Oklahoma, and we beat them in the state finals. And I got back in my vehicle, my pickup, and drove back to Tulsa to put the steer back in the old days, I don't know if they still do it or not, but in the old days, what they would do is you sold your calf on Friday and you'd stick around till Sunday, and Sunday evening or Saturday evening, you had to lead your steer to the truck, put him on the truck after you had him on display the whole time. And I drove back after the game Saturday and put my steer on the truck, then come home. So it was quite a memorable week for me. We won a state baseball tournament and had the grand steer at Tulsa State Fair. And couldn't have accomplished any of it without all the help of all the people that were involved. And like I said, Ron and Steve, they were sure an asset to the program. And the reason Mark wasn't is he'd already moved on to Texas and he was working for Dr. Wise.
Yep, gotcha. So after high school time for you, short stint at baseball.
Yes, sir.
And then we end up working for the Bradshaw family 93, 92, 93, 97 range.
Yes, sir.
Did you feel like in that time with the Bradshaws, were you cutting your teeth? Were you finding your way? Talk to us about where that time. I mean, you had a lot of success. I mean, there's no doubt about it. The success you and your family had, you had success, but once you were kind of the guy in the driver's seat on someone else's checkbook, did you talk about that?
I will, and I'll start out by saying it's basically the same way I roll today. It is nothing was planned. I played baseball for a few months. I cut my hand and couldn't play anymore. And Steve Bonham said, "Hey, look, I got a few families I sold some calves to that's when driving distance to El Reno on a daily basis. You can help some of these folks." And I had me a pretty neat gig that, looking back, the good Lord, without a doubt, has made it very easy for me because I'm not very smart. And he would say, Steve said, "Hey, look, it's real simple. These guys need your help. You need some money. Go see them. Do what needs to be done. I'm not saying you've got to rinse and blow them, do those things, but you'll figure it out. Just go help. These are good people. I'm going to help you. You'll figure it out." So I got to give y'all my routine after baseball was over and I cut my hand. And I got to give y'all my routine, my weekly routine at Redlands Community College. And it was one day at one family's house for $100 a day cash. Next day, class till noon, same gig. One at Kingfisher, one at Okarche, one here, one there. So 4 days a week, I made $400 cash. And I'm going to tell y'all, I was the wealthiest guy in college and the wealthiest guy in El Reno. And I bought everybody's lunch every day. And I swore there would never be another poor day. And those are the memories that I won't ever forget of the guys that J. Paul Fagan, Brett DeVelvis, those guys, that was the good times. So right. Steve calls and said, "Hey, I sold some calves." He said, "What are you doing this summer?" I said, "I don't know. I'll probably go drive the tractor for Ron and farm." He said, "Hey, I sold some calves to a family in Corpus Christi. They need some summer help." This was Friday, 4 or 5 o'clock. Man, there's no cell phones. Okay. So he's like, "Hey, come to the barn tomorrow, bring you some clothes. You'll ride back with this guy that bought some calves from Corpus Christi with his hired man. And they'll fly you home Sunday." So that was Thursday or Friday evening. I rode back and asked a million questions to this guy that I never saw him again after the road. He was a tractor driver for one of the farmers around there, and they paid him to come get the calves, 2 different families. Steve said, "Whatever you do when you get there, you unload those calves and you crawl up in that trailer and halt them. You lead them out of there and you tell them how good they all are. I said, I got it. I got that part. Don't worry about that. So I flew. I remember flying. We went down to the water. I'd never seen stuff like that. We went down to the water, Oceanfront Drive. We ate it. Clifton Bradshaw and his family, we ate at Water Street Seafood Company. And it just dawned on me. I thought, hey, I might need to call my mom and let her know where I'm at. So I went to the payphone. I called my mom and I say, Mom, hey, I'm in Corpus. I'm looking at a little summer job I'm going to take. She said, do what? I said, looking at a summer job I'm going to take, and I just want to tell you, in case she's wondering where I'm at, I'm not in El Reno. My vehicle's there, but I'm not. I'm flying back. Need somebody to pick me up at the airport at Oklahoma City Sunday night. So before we left there, I'd made a deal with him to work through the summer, and I didn't leave for 7 years. So I flew home, got my stuff, finished college. That was kind of somewhere right in there around spring break time. And then in May, when school was out, I remember the day school was out, I loaded my stuff up in the back of my half-ton pickup. And I got to tell this quick part of the story that's going to make everybody smile. I am definitely not a pool shark, and I'm definitely not a gambler. All right, there's this kid that thought he was pretty good shooting some pool. And I said, hey, he had a bed cover for my half-ton pickup. He took it off his pickup. I said, I'm going to shoot you for a game of pool. $100 you get if you win. You don't win, I get the bed cover. He said, deal. I beat him in a game of pool, had all my stuff loaded up the day I left, shoved underneath that because it rained. I got to looking at the weather. It was going to rain on the way to Corpus Christi, running down I-35. So I had everything stuffed in my pickup, and I had a bed cover for my pickup, and I beat him on the game. The good Lord was definitely with me because I don't know if I've ever won a game of pool in my life, especially when I gambled. And I did smoke him, and I did get the bed cover, and I'll never forget that as long as I live. And I headed off to Corpus Christi, and I never looked back. And I have not been an Okie ever since that day.
All right. Went for a summer job, stayed 7 years.
Hey,
That's a double C.
I'm sure you don't remember this, Brandon, but I never even told Brett this. The first time I met you, you were working for Bradshaws, and I was at the Houston Livestock Show. I'd been in Texas 4 months, maybe, helping Mark Kopus, clipping fallborns and Fort Worth ones and stuff, and we went down there to watch the show, and we were in the motel bar, that big motel everybody stayed at, and you were in there, and mind you, I had maybe crossed the Kansas-Nebraska line twice before I moved down there and helped Mark that spring. And so I had not been around a lot of eccentric people because Nebraskans were kind of low-key. And I just remember meeting you, and you operate with energy now. You operate with a lot of energy then. And
Yeah,
I remember
that was good old days.
I remember getting back to the motel room and asking Dan Young, I said, hey, that horn, that's something. he said he's been like that since I've never known him.
There you go. The good times.
Oh boy.
I'll be dang. All right, so Bradshaw, your time at Bradshaw, tell us. I mean, stepping stones. What was it there that got you to the next event? I mean,
Before we get any further,
you've said it twice. Nothing about you've ever planned anything.
No, exactly.
But
I'll never forget this. I thought I was always right on everything, and I always tried to have a pretty good plan going into what we were going to try to accomplish. But I'll never forget. Clifton Bradshaw told me one time. He said, "I want to tell you something right now before we get any further." I said, "Go ahead." And this is about a year and a half or 2 years into that. And I said, "No, that's not going to work. That calf's not good enough. This. No. He said, let me tell you something right now. He said, you think you're right every time. And he said, I expect you to. That's what I pay you for. But he said, one of these days, you're going to look back and you're going to thank me but you're really going to thank my checkbook for all the lessons you learned on my dollar. And that's something that I've never, ever forgot. And he is so right about, like, I thought I was right and I didn't have a clue. And, and he said, hey,
that's the truth.
He said, be glad that I got enough money to make this happen for you, because you learn a lot of lessons on my checkbook.
Yeah. I think Corey and I can both relate in our times growing up. That's very relatable there. So, I think
we showed there, and he had a set of cows. I helped that family, and in debt to him for life. Learned a lot from him. As we were phasing out there, another twist of all this that got me to the point of me wanting to do what I do today. As we were phasing out of that, toward the end of that, their show career and their cows, and living in South Texas, I met some farmers that he dealt with daily and stuff, and they didn't want to. They wanted to shoot few show pigs. I made a California run with Jay McCormick and Brandon Anderson, and Jay McCormick. We were sitting in a motel room in California, and he goes, "You need to go by and see Rory D." I said, "Who's Rory D?" And he goes, "Rory Delm, you don't know him?" And I said, "Never heard of him." He said, "We're going to call him right now." In a motel room in California, we call Rory Delm. I flew out of San Antonio. Rory D lives 30 minutes from the airport in San Antonio. When I flew back into San Antonio, I drove from the airport to Rory D's house, and we've been best friends ever since, from the first 5 minutes I met him.
Wow. So we visited with a few guys to try to get some insider trading on you and your time at Roy D's, and there was a story about you. It said that when Rory hired you, there was 3 things about it that he loved about you. Number 1, you were uncontrollable. Number 2, you were eccentric. And he said you could sell them higher and better than nobody had ever done before. They was bragging on you. Well, but there was a story that stuck out in this guy's mind about you. He said that you kind of got pretty big for your drawers, and you were in Duncan, Oklahoma, and there was a Chester White. And do you want to tell the story?
Oh, I can, yeah. Rory Delm Show Pigs. He's a legend. Anyway, he always had his way of keeping me grounded. I remember for a fact that Gary Cramblett was standing there right there, and he could not keep himself contained. He was laughing so hard. So, and might have got into the alcohol a little too much the night before, and I wasn't thinking clearly, obviously. But I told Rory, I said, "Hey, there's a Chester White boar over here that I think is one good son of a gun." I said, "I think this thing is incredible." I said, we need to own him. He said, "We don't have any Chester White sows. What are we going to do with the boar?" I said, "I don't know, but this thing's the ticket, I think. I think he's got all the right neat pieces." I said, he probably don't have enough butt or enough muscle, but the rest of him is perfect. He said, "Boy, did you bump your head?" He said, "I can tell you one thing for sure. We get that Chester boar. We won't need these diesel pickups and aluminum trailers. We can survive with Toyota pickups and homemade ag shop steel-built pig coops, because that's how we're going to be able to sell them. We won't make a living, period, selling show pigs if we got a Chester White boar with no boo-boo. It won't happen."
He said, "Boy, did you
go over there and get studying your lesson."
Yeah.
He said, "Let me tell you something. The best thing," he said, "there's 2 things. Did you bump your head?" And the next thing he said was, "That muscle on the hind quarter and ham of a show pig It's like an American Express. You better not leave home without it if you plan on winning something or if you plan on selling something very good.
Yeah.
And
Well, that was the next story that they felt like your time at Rory's there is probably what propelled you today to build these show steers, to build these sire battery you have today, was based upon a simple principle that Rory had, that never leave the salt block out. You have
That's
got
correct.
to always bring the muscle.
It's not very hard.
Yeah.
He said, it's real simple, honestly. Most of these intelligent, overpaid people, is how he put it, makes it too hard. He said, build them like a box, basically a rectangle. And he said, make them as stout as you can make them and make them travel. And don't make them too big. And he said, and you will survive. It's that simple.
Yep.
And he said, don't make it harder than what it is. When people get in the jam, that's when they do. They make it harder than what it is.
Gotcha. Yep. So
Now, where did you meet Breck along the line, Brandon?
Right there about that time. I
About that
met
time.
Rory and Breck about the same time. 97 is when I met Breck.
Okay.
That Bradshaws last year in Fort Worth. And she was there, was a female sponsor counselor for where she was teaching school, and the ag teacher knew that her dad was an ag teacher at Hereford and said, hey, we've got several girls going. You can be a sponsor and you can drive a van. And girls, and I was actually checked in my motel and met her. And then Jay McCormick basically reintroduced us that following afternoon, and we hit it off, and realized we kind of grew up with each other, but didn't really remember each other, and kind of pretty much the rest is history.
there was
I say so y'all know the timelines and all that. I met Breck, and then I was phasing out my time at Bradshaws in South Texas. We got married. She coached for a year down there and come to me, you guys, and said her younger sister was playing college volleyball here at Abilene Christian University and going to be a senior. The job came open, and my wife approached me with that, and she said, hey, the Abilene Christian University volleyball coaching job's open. Do you mind if I apply? What do you think about me applying? I said, I'm cool with that. She said, well, if I get the job, we do got to move to Abilene, obviously. And I said, I'm good with that too, but there's no way you're going to get the job. You're 23, 24 years old. That's not going to happen. So I kind of shot her down with, you won't get the job, and we're going to figure something else out instead of that gig. But hey, here we are.
You told me when I was there, I came to visit you last November, and FYI, those of you listening to us talk about it, if you've never been, the best time you'll ever have is if you go down there and just drive through. My boys and I went. We enjoyed our time there. But you shared with us at lunch one day that you had delivered pigs in that area. You had been shopping about. You had kind of been looking for a place, because at the time y'all lived in town, you was kind of looking for a place. We'll get to that in just a second, because we're fixing to wind down part one of the Horn Livestock story. And we are now to the point that you and your family have moved to Abilene.
Yes,
it is
sir.
just the two of you. You are in transition mode here, but part one, Corey, I don't know about you, but part one was so informative, just from the people along the way that had helped you. I guess for me, it was about the guys that helped you along the way before they were who we know them as today. Would you? Is that right, Corey?
You bet. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, there's
and just the and especially the youth of all them people that were your mentors, that ended up being some of the most influential people